Thanks for your introduction. So yes, this is totally completely different. As it is kind of a deviation from my degree that I obtained from the CEU, so I studied public policy and never thought that I actually would go into anything tech related. But as I really jumped and I graduated in June and joined Bellabeat as first customer manager, and then kind of found myself take on a larger role as business development manager within BellyBeat, and I started participating with them in September. So it's been kind of a baptism by fire, and it's been really interesting. So kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today is really the role that big tech can have in actually changing policy. So you would think policy actually comes from the government, but I think as technological innovations progress, we can actually influence and actually show where problems are already existing and how we can potentially solve these problems. And policy should then answer to those problems that big tech can show. So I'm going to start first with kind of showing you where big tech trends have come from and where they're going. Kind of also show you the health status quo. My data really comes from America. Unfortunately, it's a fantastic example, but then in Europe as well, Germany and UK are not far behind regarding that data. And then I want to show you kind of what big data can do, so technology and how it can actually harvest this data and what we can do with it, and then where those policy solutions can actually fit and solve the problems. And then of course I'll also talk about my own firm because it's a plug, so there you go. So as I said, tech trends and really who are the early adopters. So I think it's pretty ubiquitous now when we think of smartphones. Everybody has a phone. That's what a phone is. And I know that my Samsung can not only track my steps, it can track my activity, I can log my food, it can tell me if I'm getting enough nutrition, my heart rate, it can even check my stress. I don't know how accurate it is, but it can and it says so. So, and then we have until the Apple Watch. So we have all of these features that we're then wanting to even cram into a smaller device that goes on our wrist so that we can keep our huge phones in our pockets and walk around and enjoy life more. And we see this kind of trend going on through tech now. We're really wanting to take all these awesome little features and make them smaller and smaller and smaller, which has then led us to the advance of activity and fitness trackers, which so far are really being used by athletes or people who are really wanting to be super fitness enthusiasts. And so these are basically taking all those functionalities and putting them on your wrist, and then people can see, heart rate in real time, and they can track your progress as you go along, and it fits, through awesome telephone applications and things. So this is really kind of the new wave, and it's coming from this movement, this quantified self movement. And what that means, the quantified self is self-awareness through self-tracking. So kind of trying to understand yourself better and your health better through understanding how you live your day to day. You don't really think about what you eat until you actually write it all down, and so this is kind of one of those things to help you along the way. Unfortunately though, most of these products are on strictly consumer market, and this is really dealing with kind of the bureaucratic red tape. So we really see, and they're also quite expensive, so it's usually about $100 to $150 per prototype. Or per fitness tracker, for example. And so this is really only strictly consumer market. And what this leads to then is the early adopters. So these early adopters are then wealthy, they're typically young, they're typically already enrolled in fitness and probably living a healthy lifestyle and running 5Ks every morning. And they're also already assumed into kind of the tech world because this is, as I said, a new wave. So it's not really bridging the gap, so to speak, with any broader populations or anything. Which is unfortunate because it really does have a grand potential, which I'll get to in a minute. So we have this potential of using wearables in order to harvest this data, and I'll tell you why it's necessary. And it's pretty scary, I think, at least the health status right now in the United States. 45% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. And what I mean by chronic disease is cancer, diabetes, congestive heart failure, or congestive heart disease, etc. And that these are really lifestyle-related diseases, unfortunately, and 1 in 4 of Americans actually have one or more, at least two chronic diseases. And it's estimated, as by 2025, that almost half the American population will have at least one chronic disease, 164 million Americans. So this is not something, it's not just a drop in the ocean, this is actually half of the American population that we're talking about. And obesity is a huge factor, of course. It's the #1 killer in the States. And this leads to complications, of course, with heart disease, with cancer and diabetes, etc. And this is costing the US $13 billion every single year. So it's also an economic issue if you look at it in that way. And so these chronic diseases, when my company, which specializes in smart devices for women to track women's health, when we look at chronic diseases and see how can it actually interact specifically with women, when you combine chronic diseases and pregnancy, it drastically increases complications with pregnancy, which means gestational diabetes, hypertension, etc., which can then lead to very much a risk in maternal death. And so the US maternal death rate is 60th globally, which might not sound so bad, except we're like the last in terms of developed countries, so to speak. So we're not doing so great. But the Center for Disease Control says that there are 3 factors specifically for chronic diseases. So that's poor diet, that's lack of activity, and it's smoking. So if we can actually narrow out or cancel these 3 factors, then that means that we can actually decrease the chance of cancer and the chance of diabetes by 80%, which is pretty drastic. And that's what I'm going to argue that actually wearable tech can do, what our devices would be able to do, and what the future actually should be, so that we can actually turn around this terrible trend. So then the question is, actually, what can big data do? I think it's no surprise to any of us, the more data that you have, the more aggregated data you have, the more you're going to be able to see overall trends and patterns actually emerge. And so this is exactly what needs to happen with wearable tech. So you take a city, you take a state, say the state of Texas, it's over 25 million people, you strap a wearable tracker on them, and you can actually see how every single person lives throughout their day, how active they are, what do they eat, how much sleep are they getting, etc. And you actually get an overall picture of the general population's health. And this is fantastic when you look at, especially for scientists and actually trying to dig deeper into what are the lifestyle influences on chronic diseases. This is going to be a wealth of knowledge. So I have one example here. So Intel is actually teaming up with Michael J. Fox Foundation, so that runs Parkinson's disease research. And they're actually implementing wearable tech tracking, and they're giving Parkinson's patients actually trackers to see how the disease affects them every single day. And so they're getting kind of a deeper understanding of what Parkinson's actually does, how it progresses, how quickly it progresses, and does it have any kind of demographic differences, etc. So what my company, BellyBeat, and really what I think a lot of wearable tech sees is kind of the advent of the digitalization of healthcare. We want to see this become more preventative healthcare, so that the doctors can actually be able to see, have you been exercising the appropriate amount of time? If you have a chronic disease, you're not allowed to sit for more than 2 hours. You need to always get around and move. And the doctor can see if you're actually doing that. And this leads then to better advice, better doctor interventions, and overall better lifestyle and better health in the end. And so basically big data then, means big science. It means more eureka moments. It means that there's going to be more discovery and there's going to be more preventative possibilities down the future, especially regarding chronic diseases and lifestyle. So unfortunately, this can't all come from big tech. This also has to be answered with policy. So I'd say, of course, the consumer devices are the first step, because we have to introduce the population with how these actually work, how trackers work. And so this is kind of our entry point into introducing the wider population with the benefits of tracking your health. Because we can provide the data, and then scientists can then analyze the data and figure out health patterns, which then can shed light on specific aggregated problems within the population. So, and this might, I would say that the creation of the policy solutions, I have just up here a few examples. So of course healthcare policy, to encourage a more preventative healthcare policy instead of a reactive one, which we have in the States, I would argue. You could have environmental policy solutions. So for example, if you see an aggregated data of a rural area and you see, you have chronic diseases that are sprouting up around a concentrated animal feeding operation, for example. You can then suspect perhaps they have polluted well water, something is going on here, and it actually is easier to address those concerns, those specific health concerns. Or then you have food policy or agricultural policy, so then you can see maybe we need to raise the standard of our food, especially for our food stamps programs or something like this, where we need to provide better quality food for people who are actually using subsidies from the US, from the government. So this is really how I see policy should react to these new technological advances. And then on top of that, I think big tech really needs to put a lot of pressure on the bureaucratic kind of system to put this in place, because the reason why, like I said, we don't really see this yet in the medical sphere so much is because of the bureaucratic red tape. So you have to go through, in the States at least, you have to go through the FDA, and that's a very arduous process, and it's really squashing, I think, a lot of innovations thus far from being able to go on a larger scale, at least within the US. So I wanted to talk briefly about what BellyBeat is actually doing to contribute. So we have actually BellaVita Leaf, and all of these products are meant for smart women, and the reason why is because kind of big tech right now, at least the wearables, it's all kind of focused on this heavy activity, this heavy fitness, and there's not a lot of focus actually placed on women, and especially maternal health. So we have BellaVita Leaf, which is our activity tracker, which women wear constantly, and it tracks your activity, it tracks your sleep cycle and your quality of sleep, and it can even track your stress. And then we have the BellyBeat Balance, which shows it's a smart scale, and it calculates all of your weight, it can calculate your BMI, and through also our application on our smartphone. It also gives you, including, together with the Leaf, it kind of gives you an overall comprehensive view of your health. And then we have the Shell, which is our smart pregnancy and baby monitor. This is perhaps the coolest thing. So you can actually listen to, record, and share a baby's heartbeat, and then share it with other people. But you can also monitor then the fetus throughout the entire fetal development, and then afterwards it's also a smart baby monitor. So I just wanted to briefly show you guys kind of, so this is a picture basically of the Leaf, and this is what women would wear constantly. And so this is just, it has sensors within it, and then it's water resistant, and women can wear it basically the entire time. And this is what I would argue that, okay, it doesn't necessarily have to be as fashionable, but I think that the general population should really start to think about integrating technology into our everyday lives so that we can become more self-aware, so that we can become more aware of our health and of ourselves and of our overall health on a larger scale. So, and then this is just a quick picture of the Balance. So we actually don't have a display because I would argue that health is just more than a number. So I know as a woman, I hate to see a number on a scale. So I think it's fantastic that it would send it directly to the app, and then I can actually see it in a comprehensive way instead of just looking at how much I weigh. So, and then here's just a picture of the Shell and how they would use it. And so it, by low energy Bluetooth, it sends the recording of the baby's heartbeat directly to the app, and then they can share it and live it and enjoy it and everything. So this is really the future. I mean, again, these are consumer products, but something along these lines I think is going to be fantastic for big tech, and I think that this has to happen, at least so we can have a revolution in the health industry, so that we can actually become more preventive, more proactive, instead of really reactionary and thinking that we're always 10 steps behind these chronic diseases. And this is going to be able, big tech at least, will be able to give us a huge overall picture of not only America's health in that way, but definitely the whole entire world.